How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am Jack Hartman, joined by my good friend Nick Norman on the other side of the country, all the way over on the Pacific Coast. I'm here. I'm here on the Atlantic Coast, and welcome to anybody that's listening. To this is the start of sort of a brainchild of Nick and mine's that we'd been talking about here for a few weeks. And we're super duper stoked to be doing this, to be starting here our own podcast on the Skyline Sports Network, which we're hoping to break off and do and make a lot bigger here as things come. But we thought we had to start somewhere, so here's a great time to start. So Nick, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell everybody. I want to hear a little bit more about you and your background in sports, and your favorite teams and all that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jack. So as you were saying, yeah, this whole thing is basically just a brainchild of us two being the biggest sports fans we know, it seems like. And if I love talking about something and if you love talking about something and we can go on for hours and hours at the same time talking with it, then we're going to do it. And
Absolutely.
anybody else wants to listen to it, then we'll make the content for them, and just really stoked about it, man. Talking about sports, it's just one of my favorite things. And watching sports is a bunch of fun, but talking about it, breaking it down, and just being able to put my thoughts into words with somebody who knows everything as well as I do about the game and about everything that we love to watch on TV. And so, yeah, just stoked to be here. As far as my background, I just graduated 1 year ago from Gordon College, where I met Jack. And at Gordon College, I did track and field. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was on the track and field team, and so I threw some shot put and discus, and that was really the limit of like my sports career as far as like high school onward. It was just throwing shot put and discus. But ever since I went out to college in New England and met Jack at Gordon, which if y'all don't know, it's basically just north of like Salem, so greater Boston area. And so we started going there, at least I started going there around 2018, the year that the Patriots won their most recent Super Bowl. The last year Tom Brady won the Super Bowl with the Patriots. And so when I was in New England, it was Patriots, it was Tom Brady, it was football, it was Celtics basketball, it was Bruins hockey. Like, Boston sports fans are some of the craziest, gutsiest, they'll rip your throat out kind of sports fans that you'll ever find. And so,
yeah, they're wild.
Out of high school, I wasn't as big of a fan of any sport, but just going to Boston and just going to Buffalo Wild Wings, sitting in the common areas and just watching games, like you become a sports fan if you're not already to some degree. And so that was really when I really got into it. But I've been a Steelers fan now. I say a Steelers fan since about 2009. The first game I ever watched was when it was Steelers Cardinals in the Super Bowl, Kurt Warner, Ben Roethlisberger. First Super Bowl I ever watched, and the play that always sticks in my head is not the 100-yard pick six by James Harrison, but it is the incredible toe drag swag of Santonio Holmes. And that play, I just remember it taking forever to review that. I remember it taking 15 minutes of just the refs talking. Did he get both feet down? And that, I was a little 8-9-year-old kid, and that was the game that really sparked everything into what it is now. When I really started watching sports and watching football for the first time, like as a fan, was 2017 Steelers, Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, the Ryan Shazier injury year, TJ Watt's rookie year. And that team was just so much fun. And so since then, I've really been into what I would call American sports. And so my teams, Steelers, and that's my primary team, that they'll be the ones that I'll always support as far as football. But other than that, I would say growing up in Southern California, I grew up in Southern California my entire life until I went off to college. And so growing up in Southern California, born in 2000, if you weren't a Kobe fan, like you were doing something wrong. And when I was born was right when Kobe and Shaq were winning their first titles. And right when I was around 9, 10 years old was when Kobe was winning his fourth and fifth ring with Pau Gasol. And so Kobe was the man. Everybody in LA, every little kid was saying Kobe when they were shooting, and they were wearing their number 8, number 24 jerseys. And so he was the man. And when I really started watching basketball was again in college, and that's LeBron's Lakers. That's Anthony Davis and LeBron and that team beating Jimmy Butler. And so the Lakers, from my memory, between Kobe and LeBron, not so good, obviously. Having a lot of young guys that didn't really do much for the Lakers. But man, growing up in Southern California, I wouldn't call myself Lakers are my team, but they're the team that I've known the longest and that just so much star power, so many awesome players. And so they're my guys. And I really am hoping that they're going to be doing something in free agency, make some trades that we'll talk about later.
Yeah,
Pass you
we'll
back to you,
definitely
Jack.
dive into that. We'll
Yeah.
definitely dive into that.
Yeah. How about you chop it up? Tell us a little bit about you and your sports fandom. I can see a little bit of it on your shirt.
Yeah, it's peeking up there a little bit. Yeah. I've been a fan of sports, watching sports it feels like my entire life. Some of my earliest memories, are around large sporting events. I remember the first Super Bowl that I remember watching was the Steelers Seahawks Super Bowl
Such a bad
in
Super Bowl, man.
2005, I think.
5-6. It was
Yeah.
2006, but 2005 season. Yeah.
Right. And then the next year I remember watching Colts Bears. But so watching football, loved watching football. Play baseball, loved watching baseball and basketball as well. All professional leagues, and then also college football and college basketball as well. Um, my dad spent most of his time growing up in the greater Syracuse, New York area, and became a really, really big Syracuse football and basketball fan. And as Nick alluded to, you can see I've got the orange on, and just fell right into place with that. I've been there for the good times and the bad times. The Michael Carter Williams season that they went all the way to the Final Four and got robbed when they called a blocking foul on him instead of a charge on Tim Hardaway Jr. Still makes me sad. To the really, really bad Syracuse football teams that have been around. And the good ones, 2018 season when they won 10 games was electric. It was awesome. So Syracuse, for college athletics. When it comes to the NFL, and this is going to make for some really, really awesome content here on this podcast. And one of the things that it was probably the thing that started me and Nick, talking and hanging out was that I'm a Browns fan. So lots of AFC North we'll be talking about, and it'll be an interesting perspective, both of us being able to talk and give our perspectives on our teams, and on that division in particular, more than most people can because we know it so well, which we're looking forward to. When it comes to baseball, I was a Pirates fan for my entire life until this season. With the Major League Baseball lockout, we got a lot of information about some of the stuff that's behind closed doors in Major League Baseball, and including that the Pittsburgh Pirates for years now have intentionally not spent money that they could, to go over the luxury tax and just spend the money anyway to get some big name players to compete, and have been very, very content with making much more money than other teams of similar market value, that decide to go over the luxury tax, and it just put a bad taste in my mouth and put me in a place that I just can't. I don't. Nobody wants to root for a team that doesn't care about winning, right? So I'm a free agent for Major League Baseball, looking for a team this year. So if any of our listeners want to pitch to me why I should be a fan of their favorite team, we'd be more than happy to hear it. Might make for a fun segment, a little ways down the line. And it's Nick, it's funny that you brought up that Lakers Heat NBA Finals because I am a Miami Heat fan.
Oh,
Which is interesting, especially this year being, on campus in New England when they were playing the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. I always loved Dwayne Wade and looked up to him. I was a shooting guard when I played basketball, and yeah, just thought that he was awesome. He had perfected the craft. But I was not a Heat fan when the big three was there of Chris Bosh, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade. It was after LeBron left that later that I became a Heat fan, but before Jimmy Butler came. So I became a fan back when they were still a good team, a competitive team, but not I'm never bandwagoned into being a Heat fan. So yeah, and when it comes to just my upbringing in sports, I was one of the kids that played as many sports as he could when I was a kid. Fall was football season, winter was basketball, spring was baseball, summer was going to different camps and doing all of them, playing outside every single day. Um, Stopped playing football after sixth grade. I loved being a receiver. I wasn't scared of people hitting me, but I hated hitting other people because I was a really, really, really small kid for my age. So that was not always fun. So stopped after that. Played baseball until I was in about fourth grade, and in fourth grade in my town was when kids started pitching, and when you have fourth graders that are pitching for the first time, they really just care about throwing as fast as they can, not trying to keep the ball over the plate. And I got hit by pitches many times,
ooh.
and just was like, you know what, this isn't it. um, and then basketball, I stuck with the longest. I played through my sophomore year of high school. Sort of some interesting tension between me and the coach regarding some other extracurricular activities that I like to do. So I, called it quits, but still will always, go to the gym and play pickup when I can, and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, sports has just sort of been there for everything. It
Yeah.
seems like when I look back at my life, and it's yeah, like you said, it's just so much fun to talk about it with somebody, and to talk about it with somebody that knows as much and cares as much about the nitty gritty details, as you. So it makes it a lot more fun. Um, we called and talked on the phone on Saturday, and originally it's just to sort of talk some details about this, and the next thing we know, it had been an hour of talking about college football realignment, which is just crazy, how that just sort of happened, and something we will talk about, on our podcast here.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's me. Hopefully, Nick and I seem interesting enough to anybody to listen through and stick with us. We definitely want to apologize for the growing pains that you're going to have to endure, as we endure them as well,
Mhm.
and figure this out for the first time. But we're just really, really happy to be doing this. And it's super awesome when you have a crazy idea and it turns into something. So
Exactly. And like Jack's saying, we're baby birds when it comes to this. So depending on what episode you see, you're going to see a different background. You may see different angles of us. You're going to be seeing updates quick, and we're going to be trying to make this the best podcast we can. And we're going to be
absolutely.
trying to pump out as much content, even though it's summer and not a lot of sports going on. But perfectly enough, funny enough, some of what we were talking about with basketball, I think perfectly aligns with some free agency talk that we can get into in a minute. But first, just you bringing up that you were a Pirates fan. Did you see the recent news this week of a new player that had his first start? A big guy, if you saw some news about him, O'Neal Cruz, 6'7" kid, infielder, just gunning throws in the infield. Did you see that?
He is huge. He's a big dude. He throws the ball fast. He hits the ball hard. I mean, the part of me, I do have to say, when I saw some of the clips, that he's had, I thought, oh, maybe, but the Pirates are just going to sort of use him as publicity for a few years and then shop him off. the Yankees will purge him or the Dodgers will purge him. These teams that have $300 million payrolls. And it's
Little Barry
so
Bonds action.
right. It'll be good. Good for Pirates fans here for a few years, but
But he's
nothing.
an absolute unit. Like we talk about Shohei Ohtani being just big and strong and just a crazy athlete. This dude, O'Neal, he's 6'7", but he's got muscle on him and he can move. This man, his infield throws to first base, man, it looked like a quarterback, just a flick of the wrist. It didn't look like he loaded up full like arm strength. And it was clocked in at something like 97 miles per hour on an infield throw. That dude can just gun some throws. He's an incredible watch for somebody who doesn't have a very big background as far as baseball, but like his baseball highlights so early on in his career already look to be really special.
Yeah, I mean he's quite a talent. His first that throw that you were talking about was the first ground ball that got hit to him this season, and threw it. It's the fastest clocked throw across the diamond, in Major League Baseball thus far. He came up at one point, I think, last year for a few days and got sent down. So it's not they're not considering him a rookie anymore or anything like that. But he basically is. Special talent. And who knows? He might be up there in the names like Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, Vladdy Guerrero Jr. These young guys in the league here.
Fernando Tatis Jr. as well down in
Yeah.
San Diego. That kid,
Yeah.
if he can stay healthy, man, he's a fun player too.
Oh yeah,
A lot of awesome young players who we're looking at a way different, I think, sports climate if we look around at American sports, where if we just take a look at like Major League Basketball with the NBA and what it is, where it's player empowerment and superstars and these studs that just let out emotion and they're awesome dudes. I feel like we're seeing so much more of that in sports, where NFL, baseball, we're just seeing player empowerment and where we're getting to know the players as the player rather than the player with the team. Even though we think of players with teams a lot, I feel like we're getting a lot more of the players and seeing them on on our Instagram feed, or just seeing them being who they are, whether it's on podcasts or videos or stuff like that. And it's just really incredible. I think it's really awesome for sports in general.
Yeah. And I think especially, they talk about how, baseball has sort of fallen to the wayside. People don't really care about it anymore. But, these kids are coming and they're making it fun for people, like people want to tune into a Sunday night baseball game to see Shohei Ohtani pitch against, the Blue Jays who have Vladdy Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette. It's a good direction for baseball as a whole. The way they're moving, for sure.
Right. So now sounds like a good time as far as getting into our primary segment for today, talking about some NBA free agency and maybe some trade talks as well, obviously, since that's going to be what's taking up a lot of people's minds, because I don't think a lot of these free agents are going to be finished signing up before some of these big trade assets are going to be moving. So just some of your first thoughts with some trade assets, some free agents. Go for it.
Yeah, man. I feel like every year we say it's, the wildest NBA free agency that we've ever heard. And you alluded to it with the player empowerment. Players want what they want and they get what they want. And they make it happen that they get what they want. And in some ways, it's good, it's fun to see, it's cool. In other ways, it's not as fun because we are in the era of the super team nowadays. Where you have teams like the Golden State Warriors who have, 4 all-star caliber players that then, are in the same division as the Sacramento Kings, which some people would call a fake franchise, right? So it's weird. It's weird how that lines up. But this year is something crazy. We've got some big names that want out. It's safe to say that the Brooklyn Nets experiment of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving was an absolute failure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I saw that in their like 3 seasons together, they only played a total of 58 games together. And some of that, is obviously injuries. And, like you can't, Kevin Durant that first year was coming back from an Achilles tear and didn't play at all in that season, that, totally get that. And the Nets were willing to pay him, that much money to just, sit there on the bench and know that he was coming back. But I mean, this has to go down as the biggest failure in NBA history right now. Just that's the fact that you had two, of some of the greatest that have ever done it. Kevin Durant, in my opinion, is a top 10 player all time. Just his scoring ability is just insane. I don't super love the way that he got his championships, but that aside, you have to. I mean, you just have to look at the talent that he is.
I saw something crazy the other day that like this stat, because you were talking about they only played like 50 some odd games together with their big three there in Brooklyn. I saw something the other day that obviously Kyrie was known for taking a lot of games off and with the COVID thing this last year. But I saw something Kyrie played something like 110-ish games in his time in Brooklyn, which isn't a lot, obviously.
Right.
But I saw something like Kevin Durant played less than him by like 10 games, which is insane because we don't think about Kevin Durant as an unreliable physically player quite as much as I think we should. Mm-hmm. Where in the last couple of years, playing less games than Kyrie Irving is insane. It's just crazy, especially considering mental aspects for Kyrie Irving. He may just sit out a game because he's just like, I need to take some time, even if he's not injured. And he has the injury issues where he's a smaller player. Whereas Kevin Durant, if he's healthy, he will play for you. So it's just crazy having two guys who made up their big three and potentially the last guy standing after the trades are going to wrap up potentially in the next 2 weeks is going to be Ben Simmons, of all people, as the last star in New York. Right. He hasn't even played a game for them yet.
Yeah. It's wild. And it's crazy. When free agency started last Thursday, there were some big moves very quickly. Nikola Jokic got his big deal. Zach LaVine got his big deal. Bradley Beal got his big deal. And others, and some moves. It's sad for me to say this, but PJ Tucker leaving the Heat and going to the Sixers. There was some movement that was happening, and then word broke that both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant wanted out, and man, everything is frozen. Everybody is waiting. Every team is waiting. Some of these really, really, valuable assets like Colin Sexton, for example, young kid that the Cavs still haven't re-signed. He's a restricted free agent, so they could always match it and keep him anyway. But still, the phone calls have stopped happening. We don't have any more news about where he's going because everybody's waiting. Because obviously, if you can pick between Kyrie, well, maybe not. Obviously, I don't know if I would pick Kyrie Irving before I'd pick Colin Sexton. But regardless,
not at this moment in their careers, but
right. But regardless, people are waiting. So let's get into some of these, some potential destinations, for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. I think let's talk Kyrie Irving first because that's a little bit easier of a conversation to have. It's been made very apparent that Kyrie Irving wants to go to the Lakers and reunite with LeBron. It's made itself obvious that Kyrie Irving realizes this little experiment of doing things on his own is not conducive to his behavior, and he wants to be back with LeBron. Nick, what are your thoughts? How do you think that would go? How do you think that would look for the Lakers if they were able to get Kyrie Irving?
Man, Kyrie Irving's just one of those guys where what he does well, he does really well, but what he does poorly, he does really poorly. Where his size and defensive skill set is just it's horrible. It's like James Harden. We've seen lowlights of James Harden's defense over the years of him just pointing at a guy being like, I'll pick him up, and the ball carrier just going right past him. But like Kyrie Irving, just limitations as a small player, limitations as a defensive, just nightmare for people. But as far as his handles, his ability to finish, his shooting, like he's just tremendous at what he's good at. And my thing is for the Lakers, if we look at that as a viable candidate, which I think everybody's looking at that as a viable candidate, because I've heard a lot of people saying it's the only candidate, where who else would want to take on that contract, even though it's 1 year? It's still a big contract.
Mhm.
And it's Kyrie Irving. It's a dude who you don't know if he's going to play every day. You don't know if he's going to physically be there as far as injury issues. And he's a defensive liability. And for the Lakers, I think his shooting ability is exactly what they need for offense. But the thing is, if we look at what LeBron needs around him as far as players, even if they're just role players, not even secondary stars, in his most recent championship he won with the Lakers, they had an awesome defensive rating and they had an awesome defensive unit as far as role players.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, Kyrie, even though he could offer a lot of scoring, he needs the ball in his hands for a good bit of it, not as ball dominant as we see the top players in the league, but still, because he's really good at going ISO and getting a bucket, he needs the ball in his hands there. And also, being a defensive liability is just something you can't have a starter on a LeBron-led team at this point in his career. Because if you actually watch LeBron's film right now, it's not like he's a poor defender as far as like skill set or athleticism whatsoever, but his effort right now with where he's at in his career, and because of his limitation in minutes potentially in his career, offensively, I think Kyrie Irving shooting really helps, but defensively, I think is where that's what would stop them from winning a championship if he got to the Lakers, I would say.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of huge aspects just with Kyrie Irving in general in this situation. One is, yeah, he opted in to to his final year with the Nets, knowing that the best way for him to get as much money as he wants is to do that. Nobody else was going to pay him that much money. So to opt in and then force his way out via trade. So that puts a lot of teams in a weird situation, which is, are we going to do it? Because it has been made very clear that regardless where Kyrie Irving suits up and plays for in the 2022-2023 season, when he becomes a free agent and on July 1st, 2023, he is going to try and go to the Lakers. Like he's made that very clear. So there have been some teams that are talking, like the Mavs have been talking about, maybe trading for him because they feel like they're a piece away after making it to the Western Conference Finals. Though I'm not sure if that's the piece, but that's neither here nor there. There are a couple other teams at one time. Miami, was brought up. But again, all of these teams have to be thinking: do we want Kyrie Irving? Do we want an unreliable Kyrie Irving for 1 year while paying him $47 million? And I think the answer is no. So I think really this is going to come down to, or not 47 million, I think 36. But regardless, this is
Westbrook's 47,
right, which I'm about to get to. But that's gonna, it's gonna come down to, it's going to come down to the Lakers. And I think you're right that, he is a defensive liability. Though I wonder if some of that defensive liability is similar to what we saw with James Harden at the very end of his stint with the Rockets, where it wasn't necessarily he's a defensive liability, he just doesn't want to be there.
Yeah,
Which could very well be the case. But the thing that I think actually could make this work is that LeBron James has been running the point guard ever since his second year with the Lakers. The first year they still had Lonzo Ball and Rajon Rondo. They were trying to make stuff work and it didn't work. Since then, he's really been their point guard. He's been running it as a point forward, and that takes a lot. Like that wears you out. Being the facilitator of the offense all the time, while you also need to be the number one scoring option at the same time. I think that shows with Russell Westbrook towards the end at Oklahoma City, or at least that his MVP season, when right after Kevin Durant had left. He had to do it all by himself, and I mean he was spectacular and did. But I digress. So I think it could work because it gives the Lakers a shooter, and it takes more pressure off of LeBron. And I think if Anthony Davis can get healthy and stay healthy, that could actually work. I think the biggest problem with some of these super teams, nowadays, especially you look at the Nets when they had Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. The reason that didn't work, besides unreliability, is that they are all ball dominant players. Every one of them scores off the dribble, right? They can score not going off the dribble, but they need the ball in their hand to score. They're not their skill set is not moving around to get open like Steph Curry can, for example.
Mhm.
Anthony Davis is a ball dominant player, but he's a ball dominant player in the paint, right? So you just need somebody to get him the ball in the paint, which doesn't clog up offenses. LeBron is good at everything. I mean, he's shown he can be a facilitator as well as a scorer here in these last couple of years with the Lakers. And I think Kyrie Irving could bring a little bit of balance if they get the right role players. The biggest problem for the Lakers since they won their championship is they won their championship. All of those guys that were the role players were free agents, and they all got contracts elsewhere that were better than what the Lakers were going to offer. And since then, the Lakers have had nothing, right? So I think it could work. I think it would probably be a better option than and work better than what we thought the Russell Westbrook Lakers, would look like.
100%. Yeah.
So I think for sure Kyrie Irving is playing for the Lakers this coming season. I think everybody can agree with that. It's just a matter of how, and what Brooklyn gets in return.
That's what I've heard, though. That's the crazy thing that I've heard, that they're saying that the Lakers are the actual ones that are holding it up potentially, is the news that I've heard as far as reporting, that the Lakers are basically saying, okay, we'll give you Westbrook, but you have to give us Kyrie and Seth Curry. And that's just insane to me, that the Lakers are basically dictating the means of the trade. That's crazy to me, because we looked at within the last couple weeks, the last month, as Westbrook being an untradeable asset if you don't attach a one. But Kyrie's becoming somehow worse of an asset than Westbrook, which is crazy. That's insane.
Yeah, and I think we can attribute all of that to work ethic. I mean, regardless of what you think of Russell Westbrook now, I mean, I think he got a bad rap. Him and Frank Vogel got blamed for the Lakers' issues, and I don't think it was them. I think it was a lot of things. But nobody hustles harder than Russell Westbrook. Nobody works harder than Russell Westbrook. It's the reason that he's Mr. Triple Double, right? Like that. Like you can't do that if you don't have an insane work ethic. And Kyrie Irving's is lacking. And I think the last sort of trade thing that I saw was that was somebody saying that the Lakers could offer Talen Horton-Tucker and Russell Westbrook for Kyrie Irving and Seth Curry, which money-wise is equal.
I like that a lot.
And money-wise is equal. Both teams are taking on pretty much the same amount of money. And I mean, maybe the Lakers know something that we don't about Talen Horton-Tucker, but the value that they have in him is way higher than anything I think I've ever seen.
100%.
It's wild.
I just find it crazy too, as far as what we're looking at potentially what the Nets to look like after that trade. Because if they're giving up Seth Curry and Kyrie, then two of your top players are going to be Westbrook and are going to be Ben Simmons, two ball dominant passers who can't shoot. And you want to have those guys on the court at the same time, or have one of them come off the bench? That's crazy to me. Because we know that Kyrie is going to be traded, and we know that Kevin Durant's going to be traded, or they're going to have to do something insane or something. And I think it's very much on the table that all three of their star players right now are going to be traded before the season even starts. All three of them. I think Ben Simmons, because he's on the 5-year contract and you're not allowed to have two players on their rookie 5-year extensions on the same team, that because of the Kevin Durant trade that will come, they're going to have to get rid of Ben Simmons in order to take on a Bam Adebayo or somebody of that sort who's on that 5-year extension. And so we see a completely different Nets team that still has really interesting players that aren't just role players, but it's going to look completely different than this year's Nets team, I would believe.
Yeah. The other thing that makes things interesting is, like, so we talked about, Russell Westbrook seemed like the worst trade value, untradeable. Then we're like, oh man, no, it's Kyrie Irving. Ben Simmons might be below that even, because we haven't seen him play in over a year. And the last time we saw him play, he was too scared to shoot a layup, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
an open dunk. It was bad.
Right.
And that was the
So,
Hawks series, if I remember. He just imploded.
It was awful. And that, sent the Sixers spiraling, it seemed, but they've seemed to work that out. But, well, more or less. But so his trade value might be even lower. And the Nets are definitely planning for the future in all of this. They're trying to acquire as many picks as possible, plan for the future. I see a reality where, where they could trade Ben Simmons. A trade to the Heat with Kevin Durant could include Ben Simmons so that they could get Bam Adebayo in return. Or a 3-team deal that sends Ben Simmons elsewhere in that, so that Miami can also then help get the assets that they want to give to the Nets, whatever. Or I could see the Nets holding on to him, making him play this year, because he posted right before Kevin Durant announced, I'm feeling really good or whatever. So if he has to do something, basically.
Did Kyrie demand a trade is my question, because if I remember, he signed on for the 1-year deal, but I remember that happening and then Kevin Durant asking out immediately, but I don't remember Kyrie asking out before that and that generating Kevin Durant, because my thought process and what I had been hearing was Kevin Durant found it disrespectful that they didn't get to know Kyrie Irving and didn't get to understand him and be able to facilitate the best opportunities for him. But I don't actually remember that Kyrie asked out in general, at least. I don't remember a report about that. Am I wrong?
He didn't necessarily ask out, but he still kept it, open that, like, I want to play for the Lakers. And the Nets actually decided, we're not entering the season with one of them. They're both going. If one goes, they both go. Just because of they don't want a repeat of what happened last year of them only having one and being, sort of handcuffed by that. But anyway,
they still want to play together even after this season. Like, I've heard they want to be on the same team, which is insane to me that Kevin Durant wants to do that. Going from a team where it seemed like what tore it apart was Kyrie, as far as what tore apart James Harden, even though we know him as a deteriorating and declining player. The reason that he wanted to leave and the reason he didn't put in the effort and kind of imploded his value was because of his opinions on Kyrie, is what it seems like. And so Kevin Durant, after this mess that is Brooklyn, still wanting to play with Kyrie is crazy to me.
Yeah, I think that is sort of for him, like, and ideally we're still playing together, but not, he's going into the, conversations of finding, him a new team. He's not saying to management, Kyrie Irving better be part of the trade. That's not necessarily happening. But anyway, to real briefly, and then we should move on to Kevin Durant and talk through some of that. I think that the Nets might hold on to Ben Simmons if they and have him play and have him get his confidence back up, so that his his trade value is so much higher. Because right now, I don't think they could get first-round picks for Ben Simmons if they wanted.
Man,
maybe they could.
Ben Simmons trade. If you look at the James Harden Ben Simmons trade, it looks like an insane trade right now. Not just for one side or the other, but for both sides, the assets that they got. Somehow they both traded them for what seemed like massive assets, and somehow both assets fell off a cliff, it seems like, where James Harden has never looked anything even like Brooklyn James Harden, and Ben Simmons hasn't even played, and any of the role players and everything that came along haven't done much either. And that's crazy that the trade, you hear about trades being win-wins or one team won or the other team won. Somehow it seems like both teams lost, and that's nobody would have thought that whatsoever that day. We're thinking about an Embiid Harden team back then. We thought that will be fantastic, and thinking about getting away from James Harden to add Ben Simmons, a defensive player of the year candidate most years to that Brooklyn team.
Yeah.
How did it all go wrong? It's insane.
Right. Yeah.
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 But as far as
Let's
for Kevin Durant for you, obviously we're thinking we hear this team's interested in a trade package for Kevin Durant. Every team's interested in a trade package for Kevin Durant.
Absolutely.
If you're competent and for some reason like it, everybody's trying to trade for Kevin Durant. Doesn't even matter. Sacramento is going to be trying to trade for Kevin Durant, and
Yep.
I don't think they have 5 assets that would equal Kevin Durant as far as even active players.
Right.
Doesn't even matter. But if you're looking at fits for Kevin Durant or places that you think Kevin Durant would really be able to realistically be traded to that would be a contender, because you're going to have to give up a lot for him, what are you looking at as far as teams and fits?
Yeah. So everybody's talking Phoenix because he has Phoenix on his list, but Brooklyn is saying we will not trade him to Phoenix unless we get Devin Booker. And the Suns just locked up Devin Booker for 5 years on, I think, the Supermax, maybe just the max, but definitely the max, but maybe the Supermax. The Devin Booker isn't going anywhere. You know, the Suns are committed to him long term. He's not going anywhere. So I don't think the Suns are actually realistic. I think that there are a couple other teams that are realistic. Golden State definitely has the best pieces to put together to offer, but I think everybody's forgetting that I don't think Kevin Durant wants to go back to Golden State.
Man.
He left Golden State in the first place because everybody was sort of, you know, tarnishing his good name, his reputation about, well, you didn't really win these championships. You went to a 73 win team, right? And joined them after they sent your sorry butt home in the Western Conference Finals after a 3-1 lead. And you know, you like those aren't real. So he wanted to go somewhere where he was going to be the top dog. He was going to build it up himself. So I don't think he's going to want to go back to Golden State, even if Golden State makes an offer of Kuminga and Wiseman and Poole and Wiggins and 3 first-round picks. You know, Brooklyn has said, you know, we want to help Kevin Durant get to where he wants to go and make that as best we can. So I don't think Golden State's realistic, really.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, think about the television, though, because both you and I and a lot of other talking heads are convinced Kyrie to the Lakers. Imagine this Lakers team, LeBron and Kyrie, and Durant back with Steph Curry. Just imagine those Western Conference playoffs. Just imagine those teams going at it. It will be beautiful basketball. It would still, I think, turn out to be LeBron losing like he always seemed to do with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant together. But that would just be awesome basketball. If everybody's healthy, if everybody's playing up to what they could this season, that would be insanely fun to see all over again. It would be a storybook season, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, you know, everything, you know, coming full circle there. You know, there are some teams. So people are talking about Toronto, about Kevin Durant to Toronto because of some of the assets that they have. Again, I'm not entirely sure that KD wants to go to Toronto, but I appreciate, or not appreciate that, but like I see where Toronto has the stuff to send. I think that the best fit and the thing that makes the most sense, and I want everybody to know that this is not biased because I was a Thunder fan when KD left. So I don't like Kevin Durant. I do not. But I think that the Heat actually have the best chance to get him. I think that they could package. They have a good number of picks.
What
I
are
think
you
they could
trading?
package
What are you trading?
Tyler Hero.
Okay.
Who is a young? They say they want 2 young star caliber players. Tyler Hero is that, and I think, and I honestly think that when it comes time for him to be a free agent at the end of his rookie deal, he would want out anyway because the Heat decided to pay Duncan Robinson. I think he probably doesn't like that very much. So him, you could add Duncan Robinson to that with the Heat re-signing Victor Oladipo And with how well he played in the playoffs, I like him coming off the bench in the small forward / shooting guard spot. So Duncan, so you've got, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Nikola Jovic, their, newly acquired first round pick, who has looked pretty good in the few summer league games that the Heat have played already. And then they've got picks. They've got a lot of picks. And pick swaps. And, in the NBA, they do the whole pick swap thing. And that's really, really valued for some reason. Especially for some reason when a team that is bad is trading for a pick swap from a team that's good. I don't get it because you could swap, but you're probably going to be in a better position anyway. But I don't know. The point is they have the package there as just a 2-team deal. As a 3-team deal, you can add Bam Adebayo if you can get Ben Simmons elsewhere. I don't think Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant as a package together will go anywhere because I think the contracts are too big and they're probably maybe Detroit, teams that aren't really paying anybody big money could try and make that work. But I like that. But you want to talk about NBA coming full circle, big moments. I love Sam Presti at Oklahoma City with the 25 some picks that they have, trading all those picks and some of their young dudes. Maybe Chet Holmgren is in that, number 2 overall pick, trading to Brooklyn and getting Kevin Durant, and then also turning around and putting together a package for Russell Westbrook from Los Angeles. And the two of them reuniting back where it all started in Oklahoma City. It's a long shot for sure, but in all seriousness, Oklahoma City has the capital. They have, Brooklyn traded away all of their picks to get James Harden to come there in the first place. That's what they're trying to build back. But in all seriousness, and bias aside, because again, not a KD fan, I think the Heat have probably the best chance in terms of what the Nets are looking for in return. Because again, Devin Booker's off the table.
Right. I would say I 100% get what you're saying, and just popping back to the Toronto thing. Apparently, Kevin Durant, when he was growing up, was he was a Toronto Raptors fan, and his favorite player was Vince Carter, apparently. So the idea of he wouldn't want to play there, I think that it will be more about the city, but the team actually of the Raptors, I've heard actually that he quite likes it and that he's a fan of Fred VanVleet's. And so I think that will be interesting. My thing is, if you're looking at a trade package from there, you're looking at Pascal Siakam, a couple of other players, a lot of firsts.
Scotty Barnes.
I was going to say, but if you're Toronto, you don't want to give up Scotty Barnes.
No.
I was just looking at some Scotty Barnes tape this morning, and I obviously have heard a lot of people being like, no way you'd want to include him in a trade even for KD. But watching Scotty Barnes, I know this is going to sound insane, but watching him, I know people say that they think he's going to be a superstar. But watching him, if you rip the name off the jersey and put him just gray his face out and you don't know who it is, man, his film, it looks kind of like a young LeBron. And that sounds insane because anybody looking anything like LeBron, and obviously I don't have a huge background with the NBA, but if you look at his play style, obviously nowhere near the passer that LeBron's ever been. But man, the body style, not quite as big, but he's strong, can move really quickly, ability to finish at the rim. Man, he looks like a young LeBron to me in a couple of ways. Obviously not quite the shooter even of a young LeBron, where his 3-point percentage was not good this year. But man, it sounds crazy to say, nobody would ever say, oh, we're looking at an 18-year-old Michael Jordan with much of anybody.
Right.
But man, to say that anybody looks like LeBron, that for some reason is what I saw. The body type, the play style, the ability to just finish. When he's dunking the ball, to me, he finishes just like LeBron does, and in transition, it's crazy.
Yeah,
but,
he's bouncy, he's athletic, he's quick.
But on our first podcast of all things, me saying I think Scotty Barnes is LeBron, might be a little bit of a bad look, but
That's a pretty that'll be people will write that down as a pretty hot take.
yeah,
But I mean I can definitely agree with some of what you're seeing there. I think another team that's sort of a dark horse in all of this. Remember when Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving were free agents the first time, and everybody thought they were going to the Knicks?
Yep.
The Knicks they've got some pieces there that they could use.
I'm not
You know,
trading RJ Barrett if I'm the Knicks, though. Like, if you just
no, but they've got. I mean, they've got a ton of picks. They have some young guys, some young talent. Um, I mean, I don't. I know a lot of Knicks fans are really not in love with the way that they drafted, and for good reason. But regardless, the Nets are looking for young guys that they can develop. So I don't think it's going to happen, but I think they're sort of sneak. We shouldn't be ruling them out like people are.
yeah, I get that. The trade package that I've been looking at as far as like what I would like probably if I'm the Nets is I know they're saying they're not trading him to the Suns unless it's for Booker, but like I get DeAndre Ayton, I get Mikal Bridges, I get Cam Johnson and a bunch of picks. I like that package because I feel like you don't get hosed. Mikal Bridges, Defensive
Mm-hmm.
Player of the Year candidate, and you also get Ayton. Ayton's a good player. There are a lot of other good players in the league who fill his role, but he's still a good player, and you're never gonna win a trade when you're trading away a superstar. But I would feel good about getting those players back, even though it's to a contending team, even if they win a ring. The dudes you're getting back, I feel pretty good about. And you don't have to develop them much. Like Ayton and Mikal Bridges are who they are, and they will get better. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah,
what I would do, looking at the current landscape and what people are saying about these trades.
right. I think in terms of order of teams that have the best pieces to put a package together, it goes Warriors, Suns, Heat. I really do.
Yeah,
Like other
I
guys,
agree.
the thing, and this is biased towards the Heat, but Pat Riley has made a career as an executive of finding guys at very little dollar value and having them as these awesome role players. I mean, you look at guys like Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. You could have both of those guys, to a package, and he'll find something else, or Cody Martin, or no, not Cody Martin, his brother Caleb Martin, who had some valuable minutes. Omer Yurt-Seven, who when everybody was hurt last season, had a couple games that he had like 20 rebounds. Like they're Pat Riley's good at that, and making those guys look really really good. Could package them in the trade, and I could see him
Right.
doing the same thing all over again, finding other younger guys to fill those roles.
If you're the Heat, would you trade Jimmy Butler for Kevin Durant straight up?
No, no.
If you're the Heat. If you're the Nets, would you do that?
If you're the Nets, I still don't think so, because
Interesting.
again, you're trying to build up for the future.
Yeah.
um and that's and part of the thing that comes into play that people haven't really been talking about, and for good reason, because it is Kevin Durant.
Mhm.
This is probably the highest you know ceiling of player that is on the trade block, right? Maybe when Shaq was on the trade block from the Lakers,
Mhm.
back in the early 2000s, but other than that, this has to be it, right?
Right.
And but you have to think he's 33 years old.
Mhm.
He has torn his Achilles. Once he recovered that, he was in and out with hamstring and ankle issues. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to say that he's not going to be the same that he is, like Max Kellerman did. um, but there's some questions there about 33-year-old guy that you're going to pay like 160 million or whatever over 4 years, you have to think about that, so I think, that definitely teams should at least consider that when it comes to, trading everything that they have and then some to get him.
Right. He's like, even if you're not talking just about injuries purely, he's the Slim Reaper. Like, he's known for being a thin guy who doesn't have a lot on his frame. And even coming out of college, obviously, that's who he was. And
Yeah.
that was a risk that people were willing to take. And that's still a current risk. Like, we talk about Chet Holmgren being skinny. Kevin Durant was built in the same vein as Chet Holmgren.
Right.
Even though they're different players enough, but even without the injury history, Chet Holmgren doesn't have an injury history. He wasn't going to be drafted by top teams because he's too skinny, and that is a factor because it can project an injury even if you don't have a history.
So, right. Yeah. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see where all the dominoes fall with this Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant situation, and there are a few other free agents that are still out there right now that we've heard some noise about. It's a couple of these. It's probably safe to say we know exactly what's going to happen. But it'll be interesting to see where the dominoes fall. So let's just do some rapid fire with a few of these names where we think how we think it's gonna go. Let's start with James Harden. He opted out of his final year, but did that with the intention to re-sign to alleviate some financial issues for the Sixers. I think that's probably going to happen. Do you think that's going to change?
I'd say he's probably going to sign maybe a 2-3 year deal for about $5 million less a year than his 1 year contract would have been. So saving money, but he's still getting a good chunk of money considering he's a deteriorating player. So I feel confident in saying that'll probably be what happens.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about, with him, a lot of the sports media talking heads, we're talking about, now that he's, up for extension, do you give James Harden the max extension? And a lot of teams were like, no, but he'll probably want it. But he's showing it seems that he's showing, like, no, I'm willing to forgo some money. Let's get some pieces together. I think he's realizing that his legacy is being tarnished with his stint at the Nets and how things looked here in the playoffs with the Sixers, and he's desperate to I need to win a ring. So so let's so James Harden, Colin Sexton is a surprising name that's still available right now. I mean, I've heard some talks that the Mavs are interested in him. He is a restricted free agent, which means that any offer that he gets or may want to take from another team, the Cavs have the ability to match that and keep him. But it's weird not weird, but interesting what the Cavs are sort of doing. They signed Darius Garland for good reason, gave him the max contract. He's provided for them, really, really good play. But the thing that is the head scratcher for me is that the Cavs re-signed Ricky Rubio without re-signing Colin Sexton, and that just makes me have to think, like, what's going on in Cleveland that maybe we don't know about. Sexton is coming off a ACL tear, I believe. So there's that. But yeah, what do you think is going on? One, in Cleveland, and two with Colin Sexton. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I would just say with Colin Sexton, the issue obviously in this last year has been the injury bug, but I will probably say just the reason that the Cavs have been hesitant and the reason for re-signing Ricky Rubio obviously was because if we're looking at Colin Sexton, the player, obviously you'd want to give him a massive contract. He's a really good player. Injury issues obviously set aside. But if you look at this last year with the Cavaliers, I believe they traded for Rajon Rondo, and the reason they did that was because they had a bunch of injuries at the guard spot. And if you're looking at injury-plagued guards, including Ricky Rubio, because he's one of them that got injured in this last year, you're looking at a little bit of having an issue with health, generally speaking, with your guards. And if potentially you have the issue of needing to sign and trade Colin Sexton, or he's just going to sign somewhere else and you're not able to match it for some reason, you need a guard, period, because injury issues and potentially players moving on issues. And so I would say they probably just were confident they needed Ricky Rubio at the very least, because he's not at liberty to be traded somewhere else or sign somewhere else or have any major issues as far as you want to rehab him in your building and you want to try and keep him in the chemistry going with a young, talented Cleveland team. And so that's what I would say with that. But Colin Sexton, maybe they know something we don't, and maybe his injury is way worse than we think it is. But
Yeah.
if I were them, I would sign him to a big contract, and I don't know why they wouldn't do that. And I'm curious why other teams aren't making moves or at least offers and seeing what happens. So I'm
Yeah.
curious what's going on with that.
Yeah.
Like
It'll be.
Dallas is a potential fit, but I don't think Dallas has the money with letting Jalen Brunson walk. I think he could be a good fit to slide into that role. Funny enough, I think Kyrie would actually be a good fit sliding right into the Jalen Brunson role as far as small player, can create his own shot, good in the mid range and shooting the ball. But I would say that, yeah, Dallas, just money wise, it doesn't quite make sense at this moment. But Colin Sexton, good player, talented player. Most teams want somebody who can do what he does. And so I don't know why nobody was making moves before all this KD and Kyrie stuff came out. So yeah.
Yeah. I think though, you're right that Kyrie Irving, could work there for the Mavs. But again, you have to think, would you rather pay Kyrie Irving, $35 million for 1 year, or if you can get Colin Sexton at a deal that puts you, like 27, 28 million for 4 years, would you rather do that instead? I don't know. I think I would rather go with Sexton in that situation if I'm Dallas.
I agree. The other
But
thing is I've heard like Kyrie, I think, would be a good fit as far as play style playing wise in Dallas. But man, Luca, when he gets stressed out and like he seems like he's at his best and happiest when he's at his best. And those things correlate where when he's winning games, he's smiling, he's playing well. It's an avalanche of when he's playing well. It goes really, really well. And like it just doesn't stop when he's like that. But man, Kyrie, I feel like would be such a headache for such a young, talented player, even if the player and play style fits really well.
yeah, I agree. We've got a few more here. Let's run through these real quick. We've got two veteran point guards that have bounced around a little bit as of late. In Dennis Schroeder and Kemba Walker. Dennis Schroeder, as everybody knows, he was offered the pretty large deal from the Lakers that he didn't take, and he went. He declined it, and but then all that he was given was not much. He went to the Celtics. Celtics traded him to the Rockets. He was on a 1-year deal, so he is an unrestricted free agent. And then Kemba Walker, everybody knows Cardiac Kemba from his days at UConn and then in Charlotte. And then from there, he's bounced around a little bit to the Celtics, then the Knicks. On draft night, he got traded to the Pistons, but the Pistons bought out his contract, so he's also an unrestricted free agent. And yeah, I think that these are two sort of assets that people aren't really talking about. I think that Kemba Walker, let's say that Dallas doesn't bite on Kyrie Irving and they aren't able to get Colin Sexton. I think that Kemba Walker is an awesome addition to there as a mature veteran point guard who is similar to that Jalen Brunson, Kyrie Irving, smaller guy. I think he's only about 6 feet. Has good handles, can create his shot, does a good job doing that. And then Dennis Schroeder, I think he's probably going to be a later domino to fall in all of this. But I could see him being, one of those guys like I was talking about earlier. If the Heat do what I said, and maybe they add Gabe Vincent to that package, who is a young point guard with a lot of promise on a cheap deal. Then maybe Pat Riley goes and signs, Dennis Schroeder to a 1 or 2 year veterans minimum deal, to come off the bench at the point guard spot there. But those are sort of my thoughts. Nick, what are you thinking?
For Schroeder, I would say that it's a pretty straightforward what his role is, and thus what kind of team I think would want him. Mm-hmm. Where he's a young but pretty savvy veteran player who's able to really soak minutes, in my opinion, where he may not fill up the stat sheet and may not have crazy games and be super dominant, but he's just one of those guys that you can play for a lot of minutes. He stays pretty dang healthy. He gets along more or less with a lot of dudes, and I feel like that's somebody that you really want on one of these older, going to have players who aren't playing all the 82 type of teams. And so somewhere where Kevin Durant's going to be, where Kyrie's going to be, the Lakers with LeBron, even the Heat, I think some of these older teams that you need players that can really soak up minutes and really be on the court with anybody and really not take over the offense, but make sure the offense doesn't completely just die when your second team is on the court then. So I would say an older team potentially that has veteran players that can be a little injury prone, and that can fit a lot of teams, I would say. I'd say that would be a good fit for me as far as an archetype of teams. What was the other player again that you said?
Kemba Walker.
Alrighty. I would say that Kemba actually, man, the first thing that I'm thinking is is a reunion with the Celtics possible? And I'm like, one, I don't think the money makes sense with the Celtics roster and how much they have invested in the cap right now. And two, I don't think there's a real great position for them with their guard spots pretty much locked up with Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown. So I would say
they just traded for Malcolm Brogdon.
You're right.
So there isn't really a need for
in the guard room. Yep, too many people in the guard room. But are we looking at No, because I was gonna say the Clippers just signed John Wall after he got bought out, and so what team needs a smaller point guard who's able to distribute but score at a pretty good volume for a player that's not a star? And man,
Utah.
Yeah, Utah. I think Utah's going to tear it all apart. I think Donovan Mitchell has a 75% chance of not being on Utah by the start of the season. I think it's that high of a shot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's where I'm at, where why would Donovan Mitchell ever want to be there with how they're currently constructed? Gobert is not there, and they were not a great team with him there, and their defense with Gobert was a liability when coming out on the perimeter, and so three-point shooters just ate him up. They could just pass the ball around after somebody tried to drive to the paint. And I think their defense is not going to be good. I think their offense doesn't have quite enough, even with some of their good depth at their guard spots. I just don't believe that they're going to be able to do much, and so I think that Donovan Mitchell has a really good shot to be gone. And because of that, I don't think they would want to sign somebody like Kemba Walker, who isn't going to be insanely cheap, but isn't going to be one of these huge contracts, I would say. And so I don't think the team that's probably on the rebuild would sign him. But Dallas, potentially, again, filling in that Jalen Brunson role. The Clippers, before they signed John Wall, the Clippers could be interesting with that, with somebody who can lock down a little bit of that point guard position, I would say. Again, I was going to say if Miami didn't have Kyle Lowry, I feel like Kyle Lowry, with the type of player he is, I feel like he could be a good fit there if Lowry wasn't there. But what do you think?
I was just going to say, what about New Orleans? New Orleans just signed Zion. They've got Brandon Ingram, but who's their point guard? I think I think it was Eric Bledsoe, which isn't. I would much rather have Kemba Walker running the point for that team because New Orleans. I think they were a play-in team this year without Zion. They were the 8th seed. they were the 8 seed and won a couple games without Zion
Yeah.
against the
They gave
Suns.
the Suns a run for their money. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. I like that for Kemba.
Man, that's a really good fit because, like, at the guard spot, I think they had, at the guard spot, CJ McCollum's really good. Jose Alvarado came on strong as a defensive presence late in the season last season. Man, Jose Alvarado is fun to watch. I love watching that kid. His sneaky steals, I get that they feel gimmicky, but on occasion he can get a bucket here too, where like he's not purely a defensive player, even though he's a way stronger defensive player than an offensive player.
Yeah.
But he's obviously not somebody you want running the point. But I agree with you. The Pelicans, and like, man, if you look at the Pelicans roster and if they signed Kemba Walker, that's a really, really, they don't have a weakness in their starting five if they sign Kemba Walker. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward. If Zion comes back properly and Jonas Valanciunas, he's a good center too. You got a really nice starting five with that roster.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at a top 4 or 5 seed even in the West with that roster. Because think how good they were last year without Zion. And I think Zion, if you've seen any of his practice footage, he's looking athletic again. He's not
good.
Huge like he was before in the worst kind of way. Like,
not looking like Charles Barkley.
Man, a lot of people are picking the Pelicans as their frisky pick for next year, but this Pelicans team with Kemba Walker, that's going to be a team that actually is going to win a lot of games, and people aren't going to be able to roll over being like, man, the Pelicans. They got a lot of good dudes, not just an Anthony Davis style superstar or like a Chris Paul years ago or anything like that. This is a team. This is a really fun unit where I think CJ McCollum was probably one of the most underrated acquisitions in the last year. Him to the Pelicans team, I feel like he gives them more of a soul. And even if Brandon Ingram is the best player who plays right now without Zion, man, CJ McCollum's so valuable, especially without Damian Lillard. He's just been taking over, being a way better scorer than I think anybody gives him credit for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's that could be a very frisky Pelicans team right there. I mean, that would be, yeah. And even there are still a couple. I know people are talking about Thomas Bryant from Washington at the center position, who's a free agent. I mean, if you could get both of those guys, that's you've got Thomas Bryant might even be a little bit better than Valanciunas, though Valanciunas is good. So I mean, I think that again, more dominoes that are smaller and are going to fall once the Nets are successful in blowing it all up. The last guy I've got here on this list is some everybody's favorite. He holds a dear place in my heart, given that he played for Syracuse and won them their only national championship, is Carmelo Anthony, who is, he's old, but he isn't decrepit. He showed that he had some good games with the Lakers. I think he averaged double digits at least. Especially in the dog days for the Lakers last year when they were hurt. He scored some, and I've heard some talks, and if he doesn't retire, I'd assume that this is what it is go back to New York on a 1-year veterans minimum, so he can play there and retire as a Knick. So
I would say actually I get that. I think Carmelo has maybe 2 years left in the tank, where even though it wasn't a great season by him with the Lakers, for a year 19 on a team that really obviously underachieved, he had a really great year 19 for a player who obviously is quite old. Even if we're talking about LeBron year 19, 30 points, whatever. Melo had a really, really tremendous season for how late he is in his career, to where I feel like there's some of these teams where they might not necessarily be in the right location for a Carmelo Anthony, but like a Milwaukee, I think having an older shooting offensive player kind of presence would be really nice, where Milwaukee has a lot of guys or defensive players who can really lock down dudes. We're having a little bit of a defensive liability. We're adding in a shooting and scoring presence even late in their career. I think that would help to supplement if you have a Chris Middleton injury or if Drew Holiday has a little bit of a off night, I would say something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be interesting. I just feel like when we're looking at these dudes that are older in their career and don't play particularly good defense, I think they're going to be really limited also as far as their location. Like, I really don't think that Melo's going to want to play for New Orleans or Utah or Atlanta or Milwaukee because of the places that they are. And so even if some of those are good fits as far as teams and chemistry and what he brings to the table, I just think a lot of the places for these older players who have made their money and won as much as they could at where they were, I think that I just think that a lot of these are just ruled off the list purely off of location. Even if like Phoenix is a team that could win the championship, even if Chris Paul was looking like a fossil late in the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that Melo, good player, probably just gonna wrap it up like you're saying in New York. But Milwaukee would probably be my fit if they were able to get him just as a rotational pick, shooting a little bit of offensive here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I like Melo to Memphis. I mean, Memphis was a good team, a good young team, and I think he would, for those same reasons that you said, but also just a veteran presence. And I don't think that he would hate that either, given that, let's be real, Ja Morant is like the dude to watch, now. Like he is quickly turning into the face of the NBA just because he's just so athletic and explosive, and fun to watch. And he's all with the talking, and everything too. Man, when he and Pat Bev were going at it, man, in that first round series against the Timberwolves, like that was so much fun to watch. So I could see him, if he's not like, no, I want to phase out permanently. If he's like, no, I still have a little bit in the tank, I could see Memphis.
I get
as
that.
a good option.
I would just say that some of these younger, strong defensive core teams where, like, man, the work ethic kind of teams, the defensive work hard kind of teams like a Miami, even though Miami isn't quite as young as Memphis, I would say some of these teams I wouldn't want to bring Melo in because of the effort and reliability defensively, leadership wise, even though I don't think he's a bad leader. I think like if you look at like the Grizzlies or like the Heat, where they have some really awesome defensive effort young units where they don't necessarily have a great overall team defensively talent wise,
right?
Because of the effort they put in, young, energetic. I feel like having an older, less energy, less defensive prowess, not quite going to put in the effort, that I wouldn't want to have that chemistry wise if I'm adding Melo to that. So that's just where I'm at, where even though Melo shooting, older, maybe a little bit of leadership here and there, I wouldn't want to mess up a little bit of these young, improving effort players that are able to work together, have a little bit of that growing together. I just don't know that Melo would be a great influence there, even if I don't think he'd be a bad one. I just wouldn't want to mess with the chemistry with some of these. But I like the pick, and seems like it would be a good time to wrap up. This turned out to be a long first episode where I quite get the feeling that our episodes are going to run long. Even if we're shooting for maybe 40, 45 minutes or half an hour, it's going to turn into a long amount of time.
Yeah.
But feel free, guys, to comment on some of these videos and these podcasts and letting us know we're running long, but we'll try and keep it a little shorter, make it a little bit of a better length for you guys. Because I'm sure if you guys see an hour, 20-minute long podcast or video, you're going to be like, man, that's going to be a lot of time. But we'll try and keep a little bit shorter for you guys. But really enjoyed the first episode. Really stoked to be here with Jack, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Thank you so much.
This is so much fun. Love that we get to do this. Peace out, everybody.
Bye.